Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Family Law Assistance. Today, first of all, how are you doing? Like, really, how are you doing? Today, I thought that we'd have a chat about enforcement or variation of an order. You know, lockdown this time round, lockdown 2.0, is different to the first lockdown. If we think back to the first lockdown that we had, it was united, so all the nations were singing from the same hymn sheet, and the message that was given was really clear. We were told to stay home and not go out at all. In fact, at one point, we were only allowed, if you recall that far back, we were only allowed to have an exercise with no other with no other person apart from members of your household. This lockdown, firebreaker, circuit breaker, whatever they want to call it, it is different to the first lockdown. I mean, for a start, the nations are divided. So the Welsh are halfway through their lockdown, which arguably was, well, it's a lot tougher than the ones in England, with shops selling non-essential stroke essential things. And then we've got Scotland that also have their own system, and of course England has just gone down into their lockdown, but it's not the same. If we think about the first lockdown, we've got things like it's lockdown but we're still allowed out to meet with other people. It's lockdown but schools and universities are open. And if we cast our minds back to March, if you remember, we had to do things like homeschooling. We couldn't meet anybody outside. So this lockdown is very different. And along with that comes a lot of confusion. There's, whether you'd agree with it or not, there's a lot of confusion out there. So one of the things I was thinking about this, apart from the whole confusion thing, and whether you agree with it or not, the one thing that has been made super clear, both in lockdown number 1 and in lockdown number 2, is that children can travel between homes. Now, of course, and I've said this before, the devil's in the detail, right? What it doesn't say is it doesn't account for all the other scenarios, whether actually on both sides of this fence, whether you're the parent that genuinely has concerns about sending children off to contact, or whether you're somebody who has been deliberately or stopped from seeing the children because reasons. So here at Family Law Assistance, we have seen both sides of that fence. And I've certainly come to the conclusion, because what do you do, right? Often when the people that are watching us right here, right now, don't have the luxury of having a working relationship with the other parent, it makes things really difficult. So thinking on that, I came to the conclusion that in some ways, if you guys have got a court order, it does make things a little easier. And let me tell you why. If there is a court order and you're the parent that for whatever reason has just been stopped from seeing your child, then you have the opportunity to apply to the court to enforce the order. On the other side of the fence, if you're the parent that genuinely has concerns about sending your child to contact with the other parent, and there's a whole bunch of reasons. It could be vulnerable. It could be that you genuinely feel it's not safe to have your child have contact with the other parent. Then you also, if there's a court order, you also have the opportunity to apply to the court to vary that court order. Now, of course, it comes with a caveat of saying, look, I know the courts are backlogged, okay? I know that the courts at the moment are virtual. But, and this is the big but, there is an option. There is absolutely an option for both sides of that fence to pursue. One of the things that we're seeing is that on both sides of that fence, things are just happening, just stopped. No reasons, no mediations, no conciliation, no talking, no communicating, nothing. And that lack of communication is where problems start. I'll come to those people those of you that don't have a court order in a sec, but for those of you that do have a court order, and I appreciate that I'm getting a little techie here, but you know, hey, we work in family law and we deal with a lot of processes. Apart from the mindset, apart from the checking and making sure that you're all right, we deal with a heck of a lot of processes. So I'm just quickly going to go through the procedure and what I think on both sides of that fence. So if you're the parent who has just been stopped from having contact with your child and you have a court order, you have an opportunity to make an application to the courts to enforce the order. Now, the form that you're going to need is a C79 form. It's an enforcement application form. The fee costs you 150 quid. That's the court fee. And what should happen is that you should have a court hearing date within 20 days. Now, I say that because that was the procedure pre-global pandemic. If you're in that position and you need to enforce the order, it used to be 20 days. Give it a little longer to allow the courts to kind of play catch up. So you're filling out the C79 form. If you are a litigant in person, I will always recommend that you put together a short position statement. I say short, and by short I mean 2 pages. The idea of a position statement is that it's meant to be skim readable. You know, judges see a lot of cases day in and day out, and sometimes it's really useful to the court to skim read through your case and find out who's who, what's what, and what do you want. It's almost as if you were to imagine your case like a film, then you're going to want to give the court the highlights of that film. Now, the problem that most people have is they'll feel like they want to condense all of their case and all of the details in the relationships, and they said this and they did this, da 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 da, and they want to give the court pretty much War and Peace. My position on this is, look, why give War and Peace when the court's not going to read it? So it needs to be readable, it needs to look good, it needs to sound good. So I always have a 2-page rule. So you're going to fill out the C79, you're going to have multiple copies of that, and you're going to send it off to the court with a £150 fee. I would also, personally, those of you that have worked with me know that I'm a belts and braces kind of a gal, so I would be sending a hard copy to the court as well as an electronic copy to the court. In reality, that the electronic copy is going to be the one that is getting seen the most. You should get a court hearing date, I'm going to say 20 days, because that is the procedure pre-COVID. One of the plus signs that we've had is that because there's virtual hearings, okay, although we're seeing a slight delay, you do get a virtual hearing. And by virtual, I don't mean sort of face-to-face, I do mean a teleconference. And that's usually done by BT teleconference. At that hearing, both of you will be there and the court will say and try and determine whether or not the court has been breached. If the court feel that the order has been breached, there's a whole toolbox in the court that the courts can do. They could, for example, order that the previous order gets revisited. They could, for example, order that parties go to mediation. They could, if they were of the mind to, could punish the parent who has breached the court order, to tell them to pay a fine or do community service. In my experience, although the court has a huge and wide ambit of discretion, that rarely happens. What often happens is that the court will simply tell the person who's breached the order off. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, what's the point then? What's the point of enforcing an order if all we're going to do is the court isn't going to actually enforce their own order? If they're only going to give the parent who has breached the order a slap on the wrist. Well, the point is this: if you don't make an application to enforce, you're almost silently complicit in what's going on. The message that you're sending both to your child and to the other parent is, hey, it's okay for this to happen. So I would always recommend that if the order has been breached, you make an application. Now, first of all, I don't want to jump in. We are not in the process here of knee-jerking any application into court. You know, life happens, children get sick, things happen. So I would always have a 3-strike rule, because it gives the opportunity for you to try and talk to the other parent, perhaps reschedule that missed contact, make it up at a different time. Like I said, life happens. If bloody hell, if we were to knee-jerk every application when thing into court when something happens, bloody hell, the court would be much more overrun. And besides, you just end up looking like a nut. So I personally would always recommend a 3-strike rule. Like I said, if people, life happens, okay, and it gives you that opportunity to have a chat and give the benefit of the doubt. Now, if you're the other side of that fence and you're the parent who genuinely has concerns about sending your child to contact and you have a court order, then you've got an opportunity then to make an application to the court to change the order. Generally speaking, it's just not advisable just to stop the contact. For a start, you've got government advice saying, look, well, you know, children should be travelling between homes during this pandemic. But like I said, one size doesn't always fit all. So if you are that parent who genuinely has concerns, and of course they may be vulnerable children, sometimes the route to get to another parent is quite dangerous, especially if your child is using public transport to get from A to B. Maybe the place that you've originally decided to meet is just now no longer either open or appropriate. There's a whole bunch of reasons why, as a parent, you might feel that it's not safe and it's just not doable to facilitate that contact, even though you've got a court order to do that. So, in light of that, I would be always urging that we always try mediation first. Try and speak to the other parent. And listen, I totally get the fact that, you know, people who are watching this, they don't have the luxury of having a working relationship, not usually anyway, a working relationship with the other parent. So I'd always try mediation, always, always, always. If there's an opportunity for it not to go to court, I mean, who wants to be in court, right? Nobody wants to be in court. But if that fails and you don't have any other option, then the form I'm going to get you to fill out would be a C100. Now, the court fee for a C100 is £215. And the forms, well, they're quite long, but they're quite self-explanatory. But what you're going to be asking to do is to vary the order. Now, I say vary the order, and when you are going to do that, have a plan. Always have a plan. You're constantly going to be selling the solution to the court. It isn't going to be favourable if you just say, well, they're just not going to get contact. Just not going to get contact. So in that scenario, have a plan. It might be that for now, anyway, that there may be a different place that you want to suggest pick up. Maybe we could get around this. Maybe actually you've already thought ahead and thought actually that would work better. How about that? Would that work better? Always, always speak to the other parent before you kind of launch into another application. Because who wants to be in court, right? Like nobody. I'm just going to read some comments. Hi, Katia. I hope I pronounced your name right. My daughter dad just came back from a country where he needs to quarantine. Yeah, he has no intention of quarantining and wants our daughter. Should I let her go? We have a child arrangements order in place. Yeah, exactly, Katia. So it's all very well for the government to say that children can go between homes. But in your scenario, right, no, one size doesn't fit all, right? The first thing I would do is raise your concerns with dad. Send dad an email, get a paper trail going, okay? Give him the opportunity, because obviously I've only got like a few sentences, but I would be asking, well, how do you know he's not going to quarantine? Maybe if you just asked him and ensure that he's going to quarantine. If you've had communication from him that he's definitely not going to quarantine, then ask him to reconsider, okay? And just reiterate the fact that, look, this can happen, but once you have to follow the rules, okay? If all of that fails and you've tried mediation to try and come to some arrangement, then right, you know what, the advice, see above, the advice I said literally now about making an application to vary the court order is probably what you're going to need to do. But like I said, nobody wants to knee-jerk an application to court. You know, if this can be resolved out of court, that'd be a lot better. But listen, I've been in this game for around 14 years and I certainly worked in civil litigation for around 25 years. So I totally get that that may not be doable. Totally get that. Now I'm just going to talk to those of you who haven't got a court order and you're like, you might be in the same position as Katia is in right now and you guys don't have a court order. Then what do you do? Well, listen, you're going to have to make sure that you're, no one likes to think of themselves as the bad guy, but you're acting in the children's best interest. I would, in any event, try and communicate with the other ex. Yes, I know what you're going to say. But if that doesn't work, the whole point is to have a plan. So my process for anything is if this can't be resolved over the virtual cup of coffee, then I'm going to suggest mediation. And yes, if it needs to have some assistance from the court, then right, you know, first of all, people don't like to think themselves as the bad guy or wrong. Everybody's going to be acting to the best of their intentions. So sometimes though, people's opinions differ dramatically on what they think is right and what they think is wrong. And I say that because I've helped on both sides of this fence. I've seen both sides of this coin. So any of you at the moment that don't have a court order, I would communicate with the ex. And if that doesn't work, mediation. And if that doesn't work, have some assistance from the court. That's what they're there for when people can't agree. What I'm conscious about, of course, that with children being stuck in the middle and being stuck in a war zone effectively, whether it's in person or it's on virtually, kids aren't dull. You know, kids pick this stuff up. So the quicker that you guys resolve things, either between yourselves or with the assistance of the court, the better it is for everybody and more importantly, your children. All right, I know that this live comes to you on a little bit of a techie angle today, but I'm very, very conscious that most of you that watch this are either in court or you guys have a court order or you're looking for some hope, reassurance and some help. I hope that this has been achieved. Just an FYI. Don't forget to tune in to tomorrow. I know all the days seem to blur into one at the moment, but tune in tomorrow because I am going to be joined early. It's an early on the doors tomorrow at 9 o'clock with the amazing Jodie Dennison. You'll all have seen Jodie because Jodie's part of our team, and we're going to be talking about Christmas divorces. So looking forward to that. I'm really excited actually. A lot of people who are watching this and generally speaking are going to struggle. Traditionally January is the time that most people divorce, but we are seeing people divorcing and separating now. People are in trouble right now. So preempting that, I've got the fantastic live with Jodie Dennison tomorrow. And then on Thursday, bonfire night, I thought how appropriate would it be if we had fireworks with the ex. Couldn't make this up, could you? I just did. Actually, my PA did that. She came up with that. So kudos to you, Anna. So join us on Thursday at 3 o'clock where I'll be joined by our fantastic Cecilia Danielson. You've all seen Cecilia. And having a chat about how to negotiate with your ex. I think there's amazing timing for what's going on in the world right now and the difficulties that parents are facing right now. So guys, on that note, have an amazing day. Stay safe. Over and out.